You're about to hear 7 terrifying stories about video games. All you have to do is subscribe, like, and we'll get started. Story 1. The room was silent except for the sound of the rain tapping against the window. John sat at his desk, his eyes fixed on the computer screen in front of him. He had just downloaded a new game, a horror game that he had heard was the scariest game ever made. He couldn't wait to play it, but as he started the game, he began to feel uneasy. The game was dark and eerie, and the graphics were so realistic that it felt like he was actually in the game. The atmosphere was unsettling, and John found himself jumping at every little noise. As he progressed through the game, he noticed that the scenery was changing, becoming more and more sinister. Suddenly, the screen went black, and John heard a strange whispering sound coming from his computer speakers. He tried to turn the game off, but his keyboard and mouse were unresponsive. The whispering grew louder and more intense until it turned into a blood-curdling scream. John covered his ears, trying to block out the noise, but it was no use. Just as suddenly as it had started, the screaming stopped and the screen flickered back to life. John was no longer in the game. He was in a dark, empty room. He tried to stand up, but he realized that he was tied to a chair. The room was filled with an eerie mist, and he could hear strange whispering sounds all around him. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him, dressed in a long black robe. The figure leaned in close to John's face and whispered, "You should have never played this game." The figure disappeared, and John was left alone in the dark room, wondering if he would ever escape. Story 2. It was late at night when John stumbled upon an old PC game in a dusty corner of his local thrift store. The cover art depicted a shadowy figure, its eyes glowing with an unnatural red light. Despite the ominous warning on the label, John couldn't resist the temptation to play the game. As he started the game, the screen flickered to life, revealing a dark and foreboding forest. John's character, a lone traveler, set out to explore the mysterious landscape. The trees loomed overhead, casting long shadows across the forest floor. And then, he heard it, a faint, eerie whispering that seemed to be coming from all around him. John's heart raced as he cautiously made his way through the forest. Strange symbols etched into trees and rocks began to appear, and the whispering grew louder and more urgent. Suddenly, the ground opened up beneath him, and he fell into a deep, dark pit. As he landed with a thud, John realized that he was no longer in the game world. He was in a damp, musty cellar, and he wasn't alone. The shadowy figure from the game's cover art loomed over him, its eyes glowing with an unholy light. It spoke no words, but John could feel its malevolent intent. With a start, John woke up in his own bed. It was just a nightmare, he told himself. But as he reached for his computer, he noticed something strange. The game was still running, and the shadowy figure was standing on the other side of the screen, watching him. Story 3. As the sun set behind the mountains, Sarah sat at her desk, eagerly awaiting the arrival of her new PC game. She had heard rumors about this game being one of the scariest ever created, and she couldn't wait to experience it for herself. As she installed the game, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The game's title screen featured an ominous dark forest with eerie music playing in the background. She brushed it off as just part of the game's atmosphere and started playing. The game started innocently enough, with Sarah controlling a character exploring the dark forest. As she progressed, the forest became more and more sinister, with twisted trees and strange noises. Despite the fear that was creeping up on her, Sarah couldn't stop playing. Suddenly, the game glitched and the screen went black. Sarah frantically tried to restart the game, but it wouldn't load. That's when she heard it, a faint whispering coming from her computer. As the whispering grew louder, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The screen flickered back on, but it was no longer the game. Instead, it was a live feed of her own bedroom, with a shadowy figure standing in the corner. Terror seized Sarah as the figure moved closer and closer to her. Just when she thought it was about to reach her, the screen went black once again. Sarah quickly unplugged her computer, but the image of the figure was burned into her mind. She never played another PC game again, too afraid of what might be lurking inside. Story 4. As a seasoned gamer, Alex was always on the lookout for the next big thing in the world of PC gaming. One day, he stumbled upon a game that piqued his interest. It was called The Dark Room and promised to be the scariest game he had ever played. Excited to try it out, Alex eagerly downloaded the game and started playing. From the moment he entered the dark, foreboding room, he knew he was in for something truly terrifying. As he played, strange things began to happen. The game seemed to come alive, and Alex found himself completely immersed in its world. He could feel a chill in the air, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he explored the game's eerie rooms. But as he delved deeper into the game, Alex began to realize that there was something truly sinister at play. The game seemed to be controlling him, drawing him in deeper and deeper until he could no longer distinguish between reality and the game. As the game reached its climax, Alex felt a sudden jolt of fear. He knew that something terrible was going to happen, but he couldn't stop playing. And then, just as he thought it couldn't get any worse, he was suddenly transported into the game's world. Trapped in the dark, twisted realm of the dark room, Alex knew that he was in for the fight of his life. With no way to escape, he prepared to face off against the game's demonic forces, hoping against hope that he could somehow survive. But as he fought his way through the game's final levels, Alex realized that there was only one way out of this nightmare. With a final burst of strength, he destroyed the game's source code, banishing it and its evil influence from the world forever. As the darkness lifted, Alex found himself back in the real world, shaken but alive. From that day forward, Alex never played another horror game again. He knew that he had faced something truly terrifying, and he never wanted to risk experiencing anything like it ever again. Story 5. The room was dark, illuminated only by the glow of the computer screen. John was hunched over his keyboard, completely absorbed in the game he was playing. It was an old PC game he had found online, one that claimed to be cursed. He had scoffed at the idea at first, but now he wasn't so sure. As he navigated his character through the eerie landscape, John couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every time he turned a corner or entered a new area, he felt a chill run down his spine. He tried to shake it off and focus on the game, but the feeling only grew stronger. Then, something strange began to happen. The game started glitching, the graphics becoming distorted and the sound cutting in and out. John tried to quit the game, but the usual commands didn't work. He was trapped. Suddenly, the screen went black. John sat in complete darkness, heart pounding in his chest. Then, a single line of text appeared on the screen. "You shouldn't have played this game." As John stared in horror, the text began to change and morph, forming into a sinister message: "You are not alone." That was when John heard it, a low, guttural growl coming from behind him. He spun around, but there was nothing there. The growling grew louder, more menacing, and John realized that whatever was making the noise was coming closer. He tried to run, but his body was frozen in place. The growling grew louder and louder, until John felt like his eardrums would burst. Just when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, the noise stopped. John was alone in the dark once again, heart racing and palms slick with sweat. He tried to move, but he was still frozen in place. Then, a single word appeared on the screen: "Goodbye." And with that, John was gone. No one ever saw or heard from him again, and the cursed PC game was never found. But those who knew the story swore that they could still hear the growling in their nightmares and feel the icy chill of the game's curse. Story 6. It was a dark and stormy night when John decided to play a new PC game that he had just downloaded. He had heard great things about the game, but as soon as he started playing, something felt off. The game had a strange aura, and he felt like he was being watched. As he delved deeper into the game, the surroundings became eerier, and the music grew more ominous. John couldn't help but feel like he was being pulled into the game itself. Suddenly, the screen went black, and John was jolted back to reality. But as he looked around, he realized that he wasn't in his room anymore. He was in the game. The surroundings were dark and foreboding, and he could hear whispers all around him. As he tried to navigate his way out, he realized that he was not alone. Something was following him, something that he could not see but could feel its presence. It was cold and sinister, and it wanted him dead. John ran as fast as he could, but the darkness seemed to be closing in on him. Just as he thought it was the end, a bright light appeared, and he felt himself being pulled out of the game. He landed back in his room, gasping for air. But as he looked back at the computer screen, he saw a message that sent chills down his spine. It read, "You can never leave." Story 7. The old computer sat dusty and forgotten in the corner of the attic. Its once shiny exterior faded and chipped, but its power buttons still glowed with an eerie green light. Curiosity piqued, the young man approached the machine and turned it on. The startup was slow, the screen flickering as it loaded an unfamiliar game. The title screen was ominous, the letters dripping with blood. The young man hesitated, but his curiosity won out. He clicked play. The game was simple at first, but as he progressed, the graphics became more realistic, the sound effects more unsettling. The young man couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He tried to exit the game, but the button was grayed out. Suddenly, the game glitched and the young man found himself inside the game. He was being chased by a creature with glowing red eyes and razor-sharp claws. He ran through the game's twisted landscape, trying to find a way out. Just when he thought he was safe, the creature caught him. The young man closed his eyes, expecting the worst. But when he opened them, he was back in the attic, the computer screen blank. Shaken, the young man turned off the computer and left the attic. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed him out. Weeks passed, and the young man couldn't sleep, plagued by nightmares of the creature from the game. One day, he returned to the attic. The computer was gone, replaced by a note that read, "You should have never played the game." The young man never spoke of the game to anyone again, but he could never forget the terror he had experienced.